Welcome to the Marketing Share. I'm Alec Chung, and here with me is my co-host. Hey, Barb.
Hey, how's it going, Alec?
Good. It's always fun to be back with you talking to our guests. And today's guest, her name is Chae O'Brien. I know she's a GTM specialist, so tell our listeners why we're talking to Chae.
Chae's fascinating. She's literally, I would call her a GTM architect, if you will, right? Because she's studied this, I think, from an engineering eye, to be quite honest with you. And she's really looked at a lot of different industries, of course, SaaS and so forth. But she is the principal strategist at Thought Bakery, and it's a GTM-focused growth agency that's partnered with many, many SaaS companies. Some you might have seen before, including Bombora, Simulogic, G2, Hotel Tech Report, Pacer, and many, many others. And I think her real core is really dissecting and getting super, super deep in customer intimacy as it relates to GTM architecture.
Yep. Go-to-market is, as marketers, that's where the rubber hits the road for us. Really have to focus on that. I know she's going to focus in a lot on ICP, and I think that's really, really important. So how about we go talk to Chae?
Let's get started.
Okay.
Hey, Alec.
Hey, Barb. It's good to be back in studio.
I know. I'm super excited. Chae O'Brien is with us today, and we're going to dig into go-to-market strategy, one of our favorite topics, right?
Yes.
So, Chae, we've actually had several of our guests come from some operational and engineering background, and I know that's kind of your backstory as well. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in this game of go-to-market architecture and strategy.
Barb and Alec, thank you for having me on the show. I'm extremely excited. My background is essentially academically, it was marketing and finance. And then the first half of my career was spent at Shell, the global oil company. They're in the top 10 for the European or international Fortune 500. And I worked there as an operator for 5 years. And then I went on to be a CMO of an engineering services company by the time I was 28. So all of that is to say, it was just a very compact experience of being an operator with the responsibility of marrying strategic intent with hardcore execution. So working at Shell, you're making decisions that really determine if a country is going to be stocked out of oil, right? There's no real time for dilly-dallying and trying to get this person before the weekend. Like, phones are on all the time. You're really plugged into the role and you understand the impact of what you're doing. And then working as a CMO, I actually think I phenomenally failed at it because my age did work against me. You go into that thinking about tooling and like making sure the head count and like this person doing, and it really has a lot to do with understanding the existing being of the org and how operations is done. It's either executed well or there are rooms or opportunities for improvement. At the end of the day, I think being an operator in those parts of my career allowed me to realize growth was nothing about tactics really, and all about understanding how decisions are made and how do we build forward to create a bridge either between that style and a future style, or expanding the current capacity of the organization's ability to make those decisions faster and in a more agile way.
I do like an operational background, at least because I come from managing multi-sites, right? Multi-site marketing requires a very, executional and operational focus a little bit, right? To make sure you don't make some of those missteps. But to your point, I think you're absolutely right? The growth levers, the real step function changes come from understanding how those decisions are made and taking it maybe up a notch in terms of how you approach it.
Chae, I also really appreciate your honesty about your first job and looking back and saying, yeah, you know what, maybe I wasn't quite ready, because I can empathize with that. And certainly a lot of our listeners, our podcast, one of our target markets is, first time marketing leaders stepping into the role for the first time. So first of all, I appreciate you saying that. So now tell us though, how has your thinking evolved now, right? Look past the first opportunity, and now you have more experience. How has your approach to go to market evolved over the years?
That's a good one. I actually think about this often. So from energy, I jumped into digital media. I moved to the States a decade ago. My husband lived here, or now husband lived here, and there was no oil to dig in the middle of Manhattan. And first, I worked for an audience data company that was acquired by Dun and Bradstreet, and then I went on to supply side platform and with publishers, and that was really awesome to have that firsthand experience of how digital media works.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at that time, marketers was sort of reactive, right? We were now getting used, or we started getting the push towards CRMs. We were more like, we were reacting to what the product team built. So they built something, we need to put this in words, we need to add visuals to it. We then need to give that to sales. They may or may not use it. They're running their own plays. Marketing has MQLs, sales have SQLs, and we're all arguing about which definition applies to what. So that's circa 2015, 2016. I think in the past decade, what I've tried to do is then I still brought sales and product teams together, because that is when we could really pull out strong narratives. If we said the product was built for this reason, sure, but why? Like, which customers would use this better than others? Which use cases are champion use cases? So those meetings and that approach definitely worked, but it was very much reactive. And now we've seen where we have multiple audiences, multiple distros, multiple formats, and audiences have a sophisticated, I should say they are digitally mature. They're not trying to figure out where your knowledge base is or where do I find this data sheet. With generative search, the user is 100% in control, right? And marketers now have this problem of compounding, where we still have all of those audiences, channels, formats, all of that stuff to do so that we can feed the back end for the front end experience that generative AI is now providing for B2B audiences. And we see the data from, I love Six Senses report last year. It was kind of like in this I Dream of Jeannie theme. But Forrester, Six Sense, Gartner, B2B buying committees, they were like 8 persons. Now it's like 12 to 15. So we have more people joining the conversation, give or take. We have more ways or environments we can reach them. Those environments carry different degrees of trust signaling. And we have generative search kind of like stripping the creative language and parts of that marketing teams tend to lean into. So to answer the real question, which is how has it changed, is we have to come to terms with the fact that the way we approach GTM has to be somewhat individualistic to the organization through the context of who their ICP is. With tools like Clay, we can find anything about anyone, anywhere. So saying your name is not good enough. Saying that, hey, your coffee shop around the block makes great lattes, I'd love to meet you there, is not good enough. Like, we've really, really got to get into, if you have call data, like taking call data from like your 10 top deals won, creating a glossary of words out of that, then pitching that back to the team and creating content in the voice of your customer, like actually creating your own synthetic data for the marketing team to then create a myriad of assets. And the last thing I will say on that question is, with AI native companies, they're not shipping quarterly, they're shipping daily sometimes.
Yeah.
So when you are a marketer sitting in companies like that, they don't want to hear that, okay, for this, unless it's like a massive product release, you don't have weeks anymore to plan a launch. You really got to have repos of knowledge that makes your ability to execute as a marketer very flexible, very elastic, and without this kind of constant need for perfection that marketers tend to do. And I think that's what we really have to say goodbye to from a decade ago. Like, we can't have 10 people looking at the ebook, and by the time it's made the round, the ebook looks nothing. Like, we've completely lost the plot on why we're doing this in the first place. But yeah,
it looks like a house of editions that don't actually taste very good at the end of the day, right?
Yep.
All right. Speaking of that, I love the evolution piece that you just took us on, but wow, that's a lot. So
I'm sorry.
let's talk about, I'm gonna have to knock on your door because my daughter's a chemical engineer, and so Shell would be a great anyway. But now getting back into your SaaS, your transition into SaaS, right? Um, a lot of people are making mistakes and they continue to make mistakes at GTM, right? Like you just mentioned it. The timelines don't really mesh up anymore, right? I mean, we're in unrealistic with our timelines. What other challenges do you see, like leading, Thought Bakery? What do you see in clients that they're making mistakes in this go-to-market understanding that we maybe were in 2016, but we're not anymore?
I'd make the argument that it's not that they're mistakes anymore. It's a resistance to really taking stock of where you are in the context of how your market is evolving and setting goals and moving towards targets that align with the resources you have. I think it tends to create a lot of friction internally, right? So to say, okay, we have to 10x pipeline in the next 3 years, and that's like a big goal. Where did it come
Mhm.
from? No idea. We just have to do that. We plan to raise, by then it's our
Mhm.
Series B, blah blah. And you're like, okay, cool. And the marketing team is not that it's not that they don't want to be behind you. It's for people to really have that invested appetite to take your GTM efforts to where it needs to go across audiences, across formats, across distros, to be very, very curious about their ICP's day to day. I actually tell people that. If somebody gave you a notebook, can you write down what a sample day in the life looks like for your top segments within your ICP? And if you cannot tell me that, you have not done your ICP research.
Mm.
You know,
Mhm.
Smart Sally is not a persona. Like, that is ridiculous now that we still put these synthetic names and behaviors they have interested in, electric vehicles. And these things are very abstract and arbitrary, right? We have communities like Discord, Reddit, LinkedIn to some degree. Granted, right now it's a bunch of mishmash of things. But the mistake, if we want to call it, is that we have to be very, very honest that things are moving at an unprecedented pace. I work with founders usually in stealth to Series B.
Mm.
So they either have very limited customer data or they have very messy customer data because they're focused on survival and then growth, right? So you're not filling out all of the fields or being very active in your in-person meetings and stuff like that. And that's understandable. But your first party signaling is really the commodity that you have to really spend by translating that into meaningful campaigns, right? Think about how we respond to LinkedIn DMs now. We're not even we just look at the person's title and we don't even accept it, right? We don't even get past the first couple lines. There's a pitch incoming. The idea that we can still operate thinking cold works or outbound works if it's completely cold, or that personalization means data enrichment across just firmographic or demographic data. We have to throw those sort of archaic structures or templates out the window. Well, call them fundamentals because we still need to be aware of them, but start to be curious about what a modern GTM play looks like,
Mm.
right? You don't need to target 500 accounts. Yes, if you do the math, there's a certain amount, a percentage win rate that we have to scale the play so that we hit that win rate. But what you really need to do is to understand everything about your future beachhead accounts. Like, how do they think? How do they operate? Where do they look at trust signals? Right? You have, especially within the CMO community, right? We have CMO huddles. We have Latane's CMO coffee talk. There's a bunch of CMO groups, right? And I come into contact with so many marketing leaders that said, this one told me this, and this one put me onto this one, and then they mentioned your agency, and da 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 da. Because in some ways, we're even very allergic to all of the digital noise, right?
Mhm.
The ads look great. AI has made the cost of really awesome marketing almost free. or nil, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about what are the things brands they keep doing, but they're not identifying it as something that's really an obstacle, is holding on to these older playbooks that are telling them that this is how we scale, versus really going back to their foundational data, understanding who they need to land, those first 10 strong accounts or those first 30 strong accounts, and leaning into the nuance of who those people are and how they make decisions.
So it sounds like you're saying that the better way to scale these days is to actually focus on a smaller number, right? Because when you say scale, the thought is, okay, I got to do more. Because I need to grow more, grow faster, which means I got to expand my market, target more people, get more. But it sounds like you're saying the opposite. If you want to scale, get really tight and get narrow, even more narrow, and focused on just your ICP and maybe the top 20 or 25, what you said. I guess just react to that. Am I hearing you right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do that first.
Okay.
Because that's going to give you the signaling that you need to make those plays repeatable.
Okay.
If we look at AI native companies now, like Cursor, Lovable, Anthropic, OpenAI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at how they ship marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Like OpenAI's ads are awesome. It's GPT for enterprises, GPT for startups. Like it starts with building blocks. There's really not transform and modernize and none of that stuff. It's literally AI for you, AI for you. It starts to really contextualize the need. So you see it enough times that you feel provoked to be like, oh, this is really made for me. They made one for me, right? And then that gives you insights that makes the play repeatable. When we think about the media choices we have to make, right? We have product videos, founder stories, core landing pages, social media programs, ad programs. All of those things require strong narratives across segments. And if we're doing a lot of hypothesizing and inferences, that's a lot of wasted man hours and spend. But when you focus on really getting those qualified accounts in pipeline, converting them into customers and advocates, you've got language via your calls, via all of the assets they interacted with, because now we tag everything, that we can say, okay, here's what's hitting well. This is how we need to verbalize this. These are the use cases that are top of mind. This is the way this pain point is really resonating. And then you make your scale plays. But when we kind of look at this as this big open sea of fish and we're going after salmon and tuna and sorry, I don't know between river and seawater, but you get what I'm saying. Well, the sharks and the whales and everybody at once, it's just chaos. And, there are marketers who's listening to me and they'll say, but nobody does it like that. If you look at your operations, right, and you look at the different roles, you might be targeting a specific role, but you haven't segmented by the size of the company. And a marketer in a Series B company is nowhere near operating like a marketer in a Series E company. Like, sure, there are similarities, but the mandates are very different. So that's when I talk about nuance. That's what I mean.
Okay. What about storytelling? Like, are you a believer in the, hey, marketers have to tell stories? How do you fit that in?
So I've never looked at the buying journey like a line or anything wavy, because we all know it's not linear. I look at it like an atom. Brand is the nucleus at the center, if that's what you call it.
Yeah.
Sorry, my son's 5 and we do all this
it's
over
a nucleus,
and over and I get it all mixed up.
Yeah.
Yes. Little red dot in the middle.
Right.
And if you are not if everything does not amount to a story with conviction at the core of it, all of this is just a bunch of bullshit. And it renders like bullshit. And one of the best things any marketer, operator, CEO can read today, I don't know if you're familiar with her, Sarah Go. She is the founder of Conviction. It's a VC that's responsible for companies like Figma and a bunch of other very, very popular, successful ones. And she wrote a LinkedIn post I'll share with you guys on taste. What is taste? Right? And you see, unfortunately, people are even, people say taste are things like the brand's identity, but it's not. Taste goes beyond just colors or a font or the tone in which the messaging is being written. It's really the disciplined ability to know exactly what should exist, what shouldn't, and where quality truly matters. And marketers who understand taste, the story is inherent to everything that they create, whether it is on the growth or brand lever.
Hmm.
You have to be intimate. I mean, you have to be, this gets back to the intimacy and the empathy that you have with your ICP, right? Because if you are not in that space, that true intimacy with that customer, you will not be able to resonate really well and authentically with
100%.
taste.
And when you think about it, right, like so when we're talking about SaaS, it's some kind of tooling, right? We want to
Mhm.
buy your software to plug into our stack, which is either like traditional legacy industries like manufacturing, then there's consumer, where it's just like, oh, this is going to help me edit my videos or whatever it is. At the end of the day, it's a tooling decision. When you think about there's very few scenarios where that decision is going to bog down your entire day. It is literally a 15-minute thing in your cal, or 30-minute or 1 hour thing if they take a call, or if they've requested a demo. But it's basically they've gone to a website, they've run a gen query, they've heard about it on a Slack channel, seen it on LinkedIn. It's like this moment in time, and these moments compound. I'm going to give a very funny story. I only have one tattoo. It's the initials of the first letter of my 3 children. And I designed it in Canva because I knew what I wanted it to look like. I do a lot of the creative direction for the agency too. So I was like, cool, this is what I want it to look like. Zach Kitch, is Canva CMO. I've been connected with him for a while. Every once in a while, I'd drop a comment, he'd respond. I've been a Canva user for a long time. I should probably look into it. But I remember looking at it and reaching out to their team like years ago saying, I'd love to do a Canva meetup. This tool is so cool. I'm not a technical person. I don't know how to use Photoshop like other designers, but now I could actually design. And all of that is to say, all those interactions. Now we're using Figma. Figma is the dominant tool that we're using in the agency. I still use Canva to send my creative direction. I love the brand. I trusted the brand so much so to take this to a tattoo parlor and they put it on my skin and it's on my arm so it's visible, because it was always, everything that I did in the app was always high fidelity. And I think it's one of the best use cases or examples of when we mean great marketing or great taste is that every interaction, the interaction with the leadership, the interaction with the application, the interaction with the brand itself in email, it's just all says the same thing. I can trust you with decisions I have to make, right? And I'm
Well,
autonomous in that decision making.
you have now, and you're an elevated status to brand advocate. You know that, right? But I
Oh, and I'm a massive Melanie Perkins fan. Like, I've listened to all of the write-ups on her founding story. And like I said, it's just I'm probably gonna tell my son whenever they end up wanting to do business. Like, this is one of the best examples. Um, but there was a lot that was done, like the product experience, the GTM experience, the employee advocacy experience,
yeah.
right? And these things are time intensive.
Mhm,
And that's
mhm.
when we go back to the scaling plays. It's like we'll run ads or we will do this, kind of mass LinkedIn outreach. And I think what gets lost is like, well, what do people really, where can we intersect with their day? So that these micro interactions compound where they autonomously want to respond versus it's more like we're trying to color block you into clicking just so you can stop being in my feed.
Right, right. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to switch gears because I have found this all the time. And it seems like, we marketing teams love to create new kind of pathways, right? All the time, right? And I know that you and I think we've kind of said the same thing on product led growth, sales led motions, community led models. They're all overlapping in GTM, or do you see them differently? I mean, you told a great story about people are like, am I a product led marketer? Am I a sales marketer? I mean, speak to that a little bit in your work with GTM.
I mentioned this to you right before we hopped on. I think marketers love to create subcategories within categories because it seems like we're doing something new. And I don't particularly understand why. Maybe it's, as the brand in us is always like, well, we need to ship something, to make it a little more sexy. But building communities is actually the most fundamental founding principle of effective GTM of, like, I don't know, the 1940s, 1950s, right? A company, especially like in old school or legacy industries, they were a factories in a town. They were a company everyone loved. They supported local businesses. People came out to their fairs or their day or their family days. They contributed to Little League. That's community building, literal in the literal sense. And then in developing different audiences. When we talk about product-led growth, that's just great marketing. That's just great product R&D. If we're building something that people really is really going to provide contributive value to their role, domain, industry, team, then the product should accelerate that momentum in the way it is designed. And what I find is that even with product-led growth, you're kind of like, there are points of friction where you're kind of trying to get into the door sometimes with product and sales when they're making some of these decisions, because you don't want to reactively contribute. You want to have an active part to say, like, look, we're getting this from, like, within our competitive set. We're really seeing those users jazzed by this particular feature. I'm not suggesting we create the same feature, but what is that telling us, right? So that shared knowledge tends to inform a lot of these buckets, whether it's product-led growth or it's community-led growth. All it is, we've identified a demand lever that has more of an affinity with this brand. Mm-hmm. So in brand A, community is driving demand because there is a lot of nuance to how you onboard, how you really make the best of it. Clay is community led, right? I am on a few Clay Slack channels. Sometimes I get really overwhelmed, but people are trying to figure this out. At the end of the day, it's a spreadsheet UI. There's a lot of awesome things you can run, but there's a learning curve there, right? So community works. And we see that with AI research labs. OpenAI's Academy is awesome. Anthropic's, artifact library is awesome, right? Bringing people together under the shared base of learning. Community-based growth is here to stay. It is not necessarily a type of marketing, but rather a core module that requires focus. So a lot of brands may not move that lever if they don't have the resources, like a community manager or the ability to update the community or create content for the community. And then on the product-led side, is that it really depends on how the product serves that type of user, right? You have like Unity that has digital twins, right? Or companies like Siemens, and they have very sophisticated hardware and software, right? They're not looking to have people sign on, like, you're not buying those products daily, but the kind of GTM that plays you're executing, right? You're trying to get in front of CTOs, CISOs, people who's, like, there's a tick for every half hour of their day. So is a community play going to work there? Probably not in the traditional sense. Maybe a CTO dinner, maybe a popular conference. It's still sort of a community play because you look at a certain track that every CTO will gravitate to. You're in that room. You find a reason to get them together. So putting the labels on tends to make us think, okay, well, no, I really wanted to do this, a community-led motion, but then, maybe we need to push the product. It's all one and the same in terms of how they're connected. But going back to what I said earlier, we've got to be aware of the resources we have available and how we're employing them against the goals that have been set by the leadership of the firm.
My takeaway from what you're saying is, like, don't fixate so much on whether you're PLG, SLG, community-led. Just figure out what your target market needs and then try to serve that, right? And then I think sometimes we fall back on these models because then it just like, oh, okay, if I'm PLG, then I do this. and then you just think you have it. Like, oh, okay, I just follow step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
You know,
And you get frustrated when it's not like it's, you think it's a repeatable fixed thing.
Right.
But trust signaling, when we think about it in a personal life, right? There was once upon a time we trusted LinkedIn in one way. I've been on LinkedIn for 17 years. And now I'm like, I wish I could leave. Like, because I question just how useful it is. But it is. I still meet new people and connect with them on Zooms. But like the experience I have with the content has changed.
Yes.
And the trust signaling has gotten where, okay, we felt a certain way about going to a website and reading their sales pages. Now we feel differently about that. So we have to keep updating our core brand memory of where our ICP is looking for signaling and research in comparison to the level of trust they would attach to it. It's like I always tell people, you're not going to go on Tinder to look for an accountant. I mean, sure, you might find an accountant, but for other reasons, right?
Yeah, but I would agree LinkedIn's getting noisier, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the trust signaling, right?
Yeah, it is. But if someone reached out to you with a really thoughtful DM, right, you're probably going to pay attention. So it still has that baseline level of trust because people who matter to your role or your domain, they are present there. And what we kind of don't have the data to say is like, okay, well, on Reddit, technical audiences trust this content 10% more than on the brand's technical pages. Not technical pages, but the brand's pages, sorry. Or audiences trust FAQs more than they do an AMA on Reddit. Like, we have to kind of create some hypotheses and test it. But that is why I always say, think of it either like an atom or an octopus. The brand's core has to be strong. If you're not aligned on position, on narratives, on really those marquee pillars of operation and essentially why the company exists and why they're building the way they are, then the legs, they kind of, flail all over the place. Then these conversations about community building, it's like, oh, okay, we don't have bandwidth for that. Okay, no problem. All right, then let's do these one sheets. Okay, these one sheets, I'm not sure if I'm on board with how this is phrased. Okay, we have to send it to this other team. And then by the time this all gets wrapped up, it's out in market. Nobody cares. The team feels really demotivated because they've lost the plot. So the opportunity cost is not always just lost business, but it is lost morale. And with job security becoming sort of this thing that is no longer guaranteed because the world is changing at the macro and domain level pretty quickly, people are nervous. Mm-hmm. They're nervous about picking new tools. They're nervous about suggesting new learning paths. They're nervous about just suggesting new ways to work, right? So it's very much, GTM today is very much a people domain or the study of how our work is changing as it is how our tooling and architecture is changing.
Do you think that is a reason why customer acquisition costs are going up? Is there a connection there? I mean, because that's the stat that we hear, right? I think as marketers, we feel like it's getting more and more expensive to acquire customers. I don't know if you have a take on that.
I think it varies by industry. I think especially for B2B SaaS, the cost is going up because every channel of acquisition that we've been employing in the past decade has become saturated and noisy.
Yeah.
So we in seeking the unique and the rare, we have to spend to kind of carve that space to get that one-on-one time. Mm-hmm. But I remember chatting with a colleague, like in New York City, if you go to garysguide.com, you'll always see all of the wonderful events happening in tech. And you can find yourself at free events at the top of rooftops, having great cocktails and canapes, liaising with some awesome people with no strings attached. And what that means is that the bar for experiences, right, is high. The bar for digital interactions actually is very high for someone to read something and say, wow, this is impressive, or to look at a video and say, this really resonates. Like, it's all kind of part of the feed. Everything is as awesome as you may look at, like Cursor. I love their product launch program. They do videos. They're quite clean cut, simple. But again, you get so used to it. It's happening so often. So I think if you go back to the first party data signaling, it is, if you want to prevent your cost of acquisition from going up, you've got to invest the time on how do you create and accelerate your 1P signaling. How do you get more information about how your buying committees are making decisions so you can meet them where they are in their day? So like the syndicated play, like if you're going, putting an ad in the Wall Street Journal is not a growth play. I don't consider that a growth play. That's a brand play. You make billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars. You're raising around. It's going to do you some good. Like, be honest about what your engine is really powering, right? When we think, let's use that for a second, right? We tend to look at the GTM stack as an engine. And when you think about buying a car, ton of cars. You can buy Chevy, Jeep, Porsche, BMW. They all have engines. That is not a qualifier. You assume the car has an engine. What makes the decision is your budget, your lifestyle, the terrain and where you live, how far the car has to drive, how much seating it has for your kids. And when we talk about product and shipping new products, creating more MoFu or BoFu campaigns, we tend to think about like, okay, use cases, or the platform does this really well, or the tool does this really well, or we have this logo map. And we kind of stop being curious about where these people are really, really finding information that matters and where their trust signaling is high. Like having peer communities, right? Who are their peer communities? Understanding what do they talk about, right? Sometimes being helpful without even mentioning the product. And that's why I say when we look at taking those kinds of plays, if you want to scale them, you lose the plot because it's tough to do that for 100 or 200 accounts. But if you did that really well for 20 accounts, people will talk to you. That's what I'm trying to get at. CISO, CTO, CIO, CMO, CEOs, they will talk to you. They will say, look, we don't have budget for this. We're already on this competitor, right? Like he's telling you, like, this is not even, we're already with the competitor. We have no chance. We don't want to change, right? Our dev team is 7,000 plus. Everybody's trained on this. It's just not on our mandate right now. And you can take that as a signal, okay, cool. And no, we're gonna go at this another way, or we're not gonna waste our time. Or what do we create a play for people who are on this competitor? Maybe we need to have a battle card. Maybe we need to have a battle card landing page. And maybe we need to test an ad campaign. Like, to get into the weeds of these problems is going to allow us now to really start to have a multi-pronged approach against all the different ways all the different hurdles we're going to come up against. But when we try to scale it all at once, we don't have how to put it, we never get that view into the details of problem by segment, by use case, by person, if I'm making sense.
Yeah, I think this is going to be exacerbated too, right? With AI coming into play, there's going to be more. It's going to just be more. So you will now be forced to become so much more intimate, right? Make those plays so much more intimate, even if you do get a little help from AI in putting them together. It's not going to be how fast you can create something, because you can create something really quickly. It's how well you could connect with somebody most meaningfully. So speak to how AI is shaping this GTM in your mind.
I mean, the short story there is AI is going to do its own thing to the future of work and to the future of digital buying and media. So I think OpenAI is positioned to really become the giant that all the other companies try to meet up. I think marketers should spend less time, things like understanding, which new model is out, and what hardware deals are being made. Like, sure, definitely understand what's happening in the broader market. But where we really should be paying attention is what's happening on the actual buying journey, right? So we see that OpenAI, we saw like Microsoft Build earlier this year, they launched a product called NL Web. And it's where a website is an interactive chatbot, or you can use natural language to just communicate with this website. So you don't have to navigate across several landing pages. You just have this one AI native interface, and that's going to give me all the information that I contextually need. And then we see with OpenAI checkout that came out, that product release happened last week at Dev Day, is we're going to have consumer applications natively built within within OpenAI's UI. So we don't even need to go through the website anymore. And this technology is being open sourced so that a mass amount of interest can be provoked and really get people to understand what's the power of this. With Anthropic, for instance, 80% of its users are outside of the US. I will double check that, but I believe that's the latest. And what we're seeing is that the trust signaling with different research labs is varied. What's happening with marketers is some marketers are using AI like it's a copy assistant, and that's one of the most limited usable functionality of it. What we need to recognize is marketing teams where we're getting mandates where we have less headcount. Sometimes we're getting our budgets cut and our goals are doubling. So what that really means is all of the time and all of the bandwidth we personally have as human beings need to go towards deep work. It has to go to the real meaningful stuff. So marketers today need to become a bit of product builders. You need to get, familiar with tools like At.io, Pylon, Clay, really understand how to leverage N8N to connect different applications, have your call data come in with summaries in Slack, have an automation that then turns that into nurture emails or to surface new keywords. And these things require upskilling. And if we're not carving out time, and I mean leadership, they're not allowing people to carve out time to get upskilled on this, because you don't need to learn all the workflows or all the tools, but you do need to understand what's going to work for your org in that individualistic way we were talking about earlier. It's going to phenomenally change how the bandwidth of that person is leveraged. So you can totally have a 1 to 2 person marketing team activating campaigns that it would take a 5 to 7 person team, but you need to have that 3 to 6 month gap of them head down in tooling and upskilling in workflow building to understand what this organization requires for us to really lean hard into AI and automation, and where our instructional querying is going to provide the most value. And then to create things like repo of like product knowledge bases, all of that is still very much the human being has to do, right? So you can create this central intelligence layer. And that's how AI will really fundamentally change our role. We get to build the central intelligence layer that marketing can then create formidable assets, campaigns, experiences, thoughts, ideas out of, without us having to spend hours and weeks at a time to put all of that together.
Yeah. I think a real insightful thing you just said there is that use the tools, use AI, but you need time to figure out how to make that work. And I think that's the challenge. Like, it's so fast, and so you're always feeling like you're behind. But no, take the time to figure out how to make these tools work, how to set up the technology. I think that's a very, very great insight. I appreciate you saying that. Hey, we're getting towards the end of the time, so let me throw in one last question for you here. It strikes me that the kind of GTM motions you're talking about and the way that you advise it can itself be a real key differentiator for a company, right? Most of the time you think about it's the product or it's the solution, what is different about it. But as you were talking, I'm thinking if you're a company that can get really good at figuring out how to do the things that you just said, that in and itself might be a differentiator. Have you observed that? Is that something that you ever push or that you ever try to make a case for?
Oh, 100%. And it really has changed the way I vet clients the same way clients are vetting me or prospective buyers are vetting me.
Yeah.
Because most SaaS companies think differentiation starts with messaging.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't, right? That's more of an output. It starts with how your value is built. The connection between what you make, who's it for, and how it moves through the market. When I step into GTM with a new company or new startup, I look for two things. Like where are the signals trapped? The real proof of impact, is it buried in data, in customer data, or customer behavior, or team insights that just never make it into the story? Because many times we like to say, here was a problem, they used a product, and this thing happened. And what they didn't say is like, oh, this team traditionally, their last solution took 90 days to onboard. With us, it was 24 hours. Like those are the kinds of things that really uptick the trust factor on how you go to market. And then you look for like where the story breaks, the points where the product narrative no longer fits the buyer, but buyers are still experiencing a problem, right? So we have to keep updating we should have to keep changing or updating the lens or checking the lens through which buyers are perceiving the brand, right? There was a great strategist out of the UK, Alex H.M. Smith. And he says there is the brand you build, and then there's the brand that is in market, right? They are never really the same thing.
Yeah.
We tend to think that we can curate how other people are going to perceive it. And basically, when I look at those two things, we rebuild the GTM around how the company thinks, not just what it sells. That's why leadership teams now more than ever have a core place in the trajectory of their growth, because they make or break the morale of the teams that basically have to unlearn how they've done this type of work for a decade and motivate them to learn how they're going to do it for the decade ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy for especially founder-led startups, right, to become very much, let me tell you what I'm building. Let me tell you how it is.
100%.
And they've really they forget, let me tell you something, your customers will tell you what you're building. So change the weight of those two things, right? Because I know you're passionate about thinking that you're building something, but the customers will tell you what you're building.
100%.
Yeah.
Great way to put it.
So Chae, thank you so much for being with us. How would somebody get a hold of you if they want to talk a little bit about Thought Bakery?
LinkedIn. As much as the platform is the bane of my existence, I am always there. Send me a connect, send me a DM. The wonderful thing about podcasts is I always meet great marketers and people that listen in, and they share problems that I'm always surprised by.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh my God, this has been super fun. Thank you for joining us
so
on
much.
Marketing Share.
Appreciate having you.
Thank you.